Hello?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, I know we'll still have some additional people signing in, but we have a very full agenda today, and we'd like to get started right on time so that our speakers will be able to share as much as possible with you. So again, welcome to the second class of Transformative Technologies, a course that is being offered by Ali at BCC, the Berkshire Innovation Center, and One Berkshire, the Business Council here in Berkshire County. I'm Catherine Kidd, and I am one of the 4 individuals who's been planning this course for a little over a year and a half. And today's host for our session is going to be James Rosenstein. James is a relatively new member of Ali, but has been part of this team nearly from the beginning. And James is a Berkshire native, although he left the Berkshires when he went to college and lived and worked in Europe for over 40 years. While there, he worked in the automotive industry with Toyota and Bentley, and was the first external relations staff leader for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, which was the bank that was developed after the fall of the Berlin Wall for reconstruction and transformation of economies in Central Europe. Before returning to the Berkshires, he was the executive director of the Brazilian American Chamber of Commerce. And today he is still in business, running his own consulting firm, JSR International Consulting. And he's also a council member for the Harvard Advanced Leadership Initiative, helping people transform their lives in their 3rd stage of life. So I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and just one reminder that you should put your questions in chat.
Thank you very much, Kate, and welcome to all. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see you all, and I welcome all our speakers and all the participants. As Kate said, this is now our 2nd session after the first one last week on where are we now and how did we get here, which gave an excellent overview of the key issues we're dealing with in confronting the impacts and implications of transformative technology. This week, the class will compare and contrast the ways in which 3 different countries are creating and using technology. The 3 countries are South Korea, Sweden, and the United States. For many years and on many different scales and studies, South Korea and Sweden have been identified among the top countries in innovation. A key question we will ask is how the innovation ecosystems in Sweden and South Korea differ from each other and from the innovation ecosystem in the United States. We will also hear about different public policy approaches to supporting, regulating, and implementing new technologies in the 3 countries. Speakers will explore the division of responsibility and interactions between corporations and governments in developing public policies and how technology is being applied to business and society, and will address how a number of the relevant social, work, and economic issues are being handled, such as work development, education, healthcare, infrastructure, smart manufacturing, and social impact. Our first speaker will be Professor Hyeon. He's the professor at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology, known as KAIST. He will make some introductory remarks and then pass on to Ms. Yehlin Cho, a KAIST representative of the Young Engineers Honor Society. Professor Yeo's experience includes academia, government, journalism, and international organizations. In addition, he was a member of the 2018 Pyeongchang Olympic Bid Advisory Committee and played an important role in the implementation of impressive technologies for the Olympics, including 5G. He has also been a consultant and senior advisor for the World Economic Forum and for the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative related to corporate sustainability. Ms. Cho is at the Department of Material Science and Engineering at KAIST. She's actively involved in tissue engineering, the development of the signal amplification method for high throughput super resolution imaging, and the integration of smart microgel and polyvinylidene fluoride nanofiber for biomedical sensor fabrication. Our third speaker will be Professor Henric Johnson, a counselor for science and innovation at the Swedish Embassy in Washington, D.C. Henric Johnson is a professor in computer science and the Swedish Science and Innovation Counselor to the United States at the Embassy of Sweden in Washington, D.C. He's also a visiting professor at Stanford University and a former senior Wallenberg Vinnova fellow at the Nordic Innovation House in Silicon Valley. He has been a part of the Stanford Academy Leadership Program and the Stanford Fellow Program. Professor Johnson has been an academic leader for several years as provost at the Blekinge Institute of Technology in Sweden. He has also been the director for the Center for Electronic Security and an initiator of the Blue Science Park based in Sweden. Our fourth speaker is Senator Eric Lesser, who was elected to the Massachusetts Senate on November 4th, 2014. He represents 9 communities in the 1st Hampden and Hampshire district, serving Western Massachusetts as one of the youngest members of the state Senate. Senator Lesser's legislative agenda focuses on the fight for greater economic opportunity and quality of life for Western Massachusetts, with initiatives around high-speed rail, a high-tech economy, job training, and innovation in government. Elected at the age of 29, Senator Lesser also spearheads the Senate's agenda on millennial issues, including technology policy, student debt, and greater youth management in public affairs. It is now my great pleasure to hand the floor to Professor Hyeon.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation to this wonderful session of transformational technologies. I'm very honored to be here with you, with my dear students and ladies and gentlemen, and Honorable Senator Eric Lesser. Very nice to meet you. And Professor Henric Johnson from Swedish Embassy. Very nice to meet you again. And I'd like to express my heartfelt appreciation before my speech to Mr. James Rosenstein and Professor Kathleen. I was very much impressed at their huge passion and great work. Thank you. Thank you, Megan Ali, Director. 2 years ago, when I was a member of Korean Pyeongchang Olympic Advisory Committee, I watched Science and Technology Olympic as well as players' wonderful performance. It was a great festival presenting Korea's science technology as well as wonderful players' performance. At that time, it was covered with technology-powered services such as 5G, the IoT, artificial intelligence, ultra-high definition, VR, IR. On the eve of Olympic, the night sky was illuminated with dancing drone. It was really fantastic. As you know, as you are aware, 5G after the Olympic, Korea has built the world's first 5G mobile communication network, you can download a single ultra high definition movie in 1 second. The capacity is 10,000 times effective than 4G, and the speed is about 20 times faster than the current 4G network. It is fortunate that Korea has become a leading ICT innovator in the world. However, looking back to the Korean history, a half a century ago, Korea's position was extremely poor. At that time, Korea's gross national income was only $67. Next. And it was poorest country where one citizen lived only $5 a month, only $5 a month. And it was poorest country, and Korea suffered from tragedy of Korean War. Before this, please, Yehlin, before, yeah, please, thank you. No, next time, next page, yeah. Thank you very much for your great contribution to protecting Korea at that time, including the allied countries, allied USA, allied countries in the Korean War. Thank you very much, including Sweden, great medical support. Anyway, at that time, Korea, the whole country was destroyed in ruin at the time, and we had nothing, but we had created something out of nothing after Korean War. So now Korea is known for its spectacular rise from the poorest country in the world to an advanced country and the innovative countries in the world, thanks to your cooperation. Thank you very much. This economic growth success has been described as Han miracle on Han River, but I think actually this is miracle of cooperation. Thank you very much. This achievement is now second at the top of 6 countries list for previous 5 years innovation. This is, I think, thanks to huge educational fever. As you look at the diagram, and the governmental investments on R&D, research and investments, research and development, and international cooperation. And one more important factor is that thanks to our grassroots people who are getting stronger with great enthusiasm in crisis. We always think that crisis is opportunity. The people sold wedding rings and rice to overcome this crisis in Korean War and also in financial crisis. And they made scholarship for their children by selling their cow. So we call that cow tower, 우월 탑 in Korean language. Cow is a symbol of wealth and life in agricultural society. Now Korea, actually, we have, there are many large companies like Samsung, next, LG, Hyundai, SK. Those companies were, at the time, grocery trader or rice trader or textile manufacturer and radio manufacturer, but now they became a global player, global high-tech player, operating in high-tech industries as diverse as electronics, computing, semiconductors, heavy industries, aerospace, insurance, etc. They have grown into high-tech companies while keeping pace with the economic development plan, and now they are very active in building collaboration between academia and corporations. As important as these large companies nowadays, startups are growing and significantly meaningful nowadays. In this context, I have recently come to Silicon Valley with about 100 technology-based startup candidates in my hands. I met accelerators and venture capitals and mentors and advisors in Silicon Valley, hoping Korean, especially KAIST startup challengers, will meet the Silicon Valley ecosystem and meet better opportunities to go global. So one more thing is nowadays, even actually starting from startups, but we have entertainment companies for BTS, SM, and JYP. They are also began to emerge globally and adding vitality and charming attraction. Thank you very much. Here from now on, I will introduce Yehlin Cho. Thank you for your listening. Thank you very much.
Hello, I am Yehlin Cho from KAIST, taking over from Professor Young's talk. I will introduce how Korea transformed into a leading country and Korea's global innovation and research. Technology shines in joyful situations such as festivals, but technology exerts power in the most difficult situations. The world is suffering from COVID-19 situation this year. South Korea has also suffered greatly from infections in the early stages, but is able to find stability and prevent the further spread of COVID-19 with an appropriate initial outstanding testing, tracing, and treatment. Based on Korea's excellent quarantine techniques against the COVID-19, we are transforming into a leading country. On July 2020, the Korea government announced the Korean New Deal project, which has aimed to reconstruct the economy for the post-COVID world. It comprises with the ambitious vision of rapid recovery and the structural transformation of its economy. There is three main goals and three main policies under the Korean New Deal. The government aims to transform the economy from a fast mover to a leader, from a carbon-dependent economy to a green economy, with a society go to more inclusive one. The Digital New Deal promised to promote remote services and encourage the digital economy. The Green New Deal promised to pursue a low carbon and eco-friendly economy. Finally, the government promised to reduce income inequality and among workers through stronger safety nets. Starting with the 5G commercialization as a first runner, we are trying to incorporate digital technologies with new industries, jobs, and quality of life. The venture investment in AI was increased more than threefold from 2017 to 18. And Korean government investment in AI hub was rose more than sevenfold from 2018 to present. Many startups and markets are generating and enhancing the quality of our life. For example, AI chatbot named Tasomi is served as a companion and guardian of the elderly. So Tasomi talks to elderly when they do not speak for 30 minutes and automatically calls to guardian if elderly people does not move more than 5 hours. Moreover, AI-based technologies also collaborate with education, agriculture, and security sectors. Then, how Korea achieved such rapid growth and development in economy. The collaborative works between government, private sector, and civil work have developed rapid growth of sustainable economy. Moreover, the collaborative intelligence of human and AI are driving our country into leading country, with a historically top-down innovation system that promotes close collaboration between the government, industry, and the academic community in the process of nation building, South Korea has begun emphasizing bottom-up funding for small teams of creative researchers. Korea also reinforced the linkage of public and private data maps in order to provide a comprehensive support in all areas of society. As AI replaces simple and repetitive tasks, people are threatened to lose their jobs. By 2030, more than 15% of global jobs will be automated. The core goals of Korea are to make harmony and coexistence between artificial intelligence. In Korea, new jobs are focusing on tasks that require creativity and critical thinking, persuasion, and negotiation. For this reason, emotional intelligence, leadership, and social influence, as well as cultural awareness, will retain their current importance and possibly even increases. South Korea, for example, is a high-context culture that places a heavy value on relationship when doing business. By collaborative intelligence between human and AI, it could bring positive feedback on each. However, there are still many problems to be solved. The skill gap among older and younger generation is increasingly becoming prevalent, and the current conventional thinking among senior leadership clashes with the younger generations a way of thinking. Therefore, the government and companies have to provide education and training to foster the development of digital dexterity for their workers to succeed. So, our government set the goals to innovate the education system so that the world's best talent can grow continuously and all citizens can make good use of artificial intelligence. The online education system operated by the National Information Society Agency provides a digital and information service education system that all citizens can easily share information and learn a digital system to reduce the digital gap between classes. In the common curriculum of secondary school, AI education will be implemented next year to expand the opportunity to use software and AI and improve required capability. Across all social factors, such as military, companies, public offices, and AI, all the AI training will be implemented. Digital, 5G, and AI are expected to have a great impact on entire nation and society. At the same time, chain effects are followed, which demands comprehensive regulatory innovation and some laws to secure our technology and economy and human life as needed. Based on this urgent need for regulation, Korea has revised various laws. First, the Monopoly Regulation and Fair Trade Act were enacted to promote free competition and fair trade and to encourage creativity business activities, and also to protect consumers and to strive for balanced development of national economy. Next, data safety regulation was revised to alleviate security threats generated by digital technologies and services. It is focusing on the regulation to address AI ethics issues such as safety and legal responsibility. Finally, we are trying to keep competitive AI technology and industries by taking patents. As a bioengineering KAIST, I want to show the global innovation and research of Korea. Among all countries, domestic spending on research and development ranked second place, and the number of researchers working in both academics and industry is very high. South Korea had the greatest share of researchers who moved from industry to academy in 2017 to 2019.
Thank you. Good.
A lot of industries work together with local and national university and research faculties. KAIST, a science-specified university that jumps into global value, create thinking and leading university. Recently, we received the largest amount of funds to enable Korea to stand out in a challenging time by accomplishing new research. KAIST features collaborative works with Korea's largest R&D company and joint studies between universities, and also nearby startup complexes and convergence research. What I think unique is that KAIST is promoting multidisciplinary works that break the conventional education systems. I also study in very multidisciplinary fields in bioengineering, material, and electrical engineering. KAIST is the University of Science and Technology Innovation for Humanities, Happiness, and Prosperity. As an engineer, I hope all you guys will understand the influence and importance of technology through these presentations and pursue technology for humanity in the future. And thank you for the organizers to hold this meaningful job webinar. And thank you for all the participants. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Hyeon and Yehlin. Very interesting presentation. And we will take care of the questions at the end, but there are some interesting questions. And now it's my pleasure to give the floor to Professor Henric Johnson. Henric, please go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you see my slides?
Yep. All good.
All good, okay. Thank you so much, first of all, for inviting me to this session or lecture, and also to be part of such a distinguished panel with my colleagues around the world and in the United States. So my talk or discussion here later will be based on trying to, I should say, explain a little bit about the background why Sweden, though, is an innovative country. And as you heard, it's quite famous for being innovative. And it's also a challenge, of course, to look into why is that. But I will try to give some of what I think is the story of success. There are some soft skills and also some hard skills, tech skills, of course. And it's actually the combination of all these things when the stars are put in the right position. And from the political side, when you need reformative decisions that made a long time ago, that I think made us to the position where we are today. Because Sweden has for centuries been very successful in transforming, but in the late 1800s, Sweden was one of the poorest nations, as you also heard Korea mention. But we have found ways to handle societal and industry shifts to adapt to the changing world around us. So Sweden, for those of you who doesn't know where it's located, you see a map. It's the northern part of the Europe, together with the other Nordic countries. And I think we have something that stands for openness and curiosity. That means that we're very dependent of our innovative spirit and our possibility to adapt, and also to have very good relationships with the world around us. And Sweden has always been open to international trade. And that's why you see in the United States, I can tell that we create about 300, the Swedish company, the industry creates about 65,000 jobs directly and indirectly 1 million jobs over here. We are the 15th largest investor in the United States. And if you look at the number, the 0.13%, that represent the population size compared to the globe. So it's, we're less than 10, or we are 10 million people right now. It's like a major US city. And I will also show you some example of our innovation. And I myself sometimes surprised how you as a nation with about 10 million people managed to create the impact that we did. And I think in a lot of other companies today, they see Sweden as also a perfect test bed. We have very high tech penetration of mobile devices to develop, and also to develop the broadband infrastructure. So we all early started out to work on what is today a key issue, is the digital divide. And I know that's a big thing here in the United States. I think about 30 million people don't have access to internet. And our government set a clear goal early on to make that happen in Sweden, to really get the fiber out, now the 5G and so on. So we've been working on the digital divide for a long time. So going to academic excellence, which of course is an important field when you have an innovation country, the combination of research and education and how that is combined, which I will come back. I know United States is excellent in doing, some of your top university. So Sweden has a long-term focus on education and research, and also had a major impact for innovation. Already in 1842, we introduced compulsory schooling for 7 to 13 years old people. And that has created, of course, a large impact. So today, based on our population and number of universities, we have 3% of the world's top 100 universities in Sweden. And as you remember, we only 0.13% of the global population. Of course, the Nobel Prize, it's something that's, I should say, it's a statement to Sweden's long-standing commitment to excellent research. And we're also very proud of it. It's a source of inspiration and proudness. Connecting that to the United States, since 1901, when Alfred Nobel started to hand out those prizes, we have had 40% of the laureates are American, or they are connected to an American institute. So I think the United States has developed an amazing research community, and it's also now shown in the number of Nobel Prize you received. And last year, you actually had 8 Nobel Prize laureates. And every year at the House of Sweden, the embassy here in Washington, DC, we host the American laureates 1 month before the ceremony in December. And that's always an honor to have the American laureates at House of Sweden. This year, of course, it will be different. The prizes won't be handed out from the Swedish king in Stockholm. And we're now looking into other alternatives with that. Stockholm, I should say, in Sweden is also a world-class startup scene. And if you look at the number of unicorns per capita, Stockholm is, after Silicon Valley, number 2 in the number of unicorns. You have Skype, Spotify, Minecraft, Candy Crush, and all those new digital companies blooming up. And in total, there's about 22,000 new tech companies in Stockholm, but it's also growing around the city of other major cities, and also Smorja, the regional part, is an important part of the Swedish innovation and eco subsystem. And that is connected, of course, to the government foresight and infrastructure planning, as we talked about. And one example is actually Spotify itself, that the key software developers were not in Stockholm to begin with. They were in the suburban parts of Sweden, but with a strong knowledge, a strong connection to the internet, very good access, made it possible for them to start to write the first line of code. And the rest is, of course, history, as you know, regarding Spotify. So what's really behind the scenes where these great ideas goes? We have, of course, invested a lot in R&D global. These are just some numbers. And as you can see here, South Korea, congratulations, you spend 4.55% of your GDP on research and development. And Sweden is there with 3.33%. And I think that's good. Of course, you always want to increase more. And I know this year the Swedish government put in more money in education system and research system. As you know, education, university, higher education is free in Sweden for Swedish citizens and European citizens. And if you're coming outside of those regions, you have to pay. But the tuition fee is fairly competitive to the United States, for instance. So I would highly recommend, if you're interested in international experience and high education system, high quality, you should definitely look into the Swedish system. There are scholarships to apply to, etc., etc. What you see, the Swedish distribution of R&D spending is as in the United States, coming mostly from the business sector, but also the public sector, as I mentioned. The government, we spend a lot of funding on education and research, something we're very, very proud of course. Some other soft skills I would like to highlight is, of course, unlocking the potential of everyone. We have in Sweden the highest female employment rates in Europe, about 38%. We have a feministic government, so all decisions made in government must be put in a feministic view before you make a decision. We have a welfare system creating a safety net. That means you have extensive vacation and parental leave. Vacation, you have at least 5 weeks of paid vacation, and parental leave, which should also be split in the family between husband and wife, or between the partners, is about it's 480 paid days per kid. So that makes a lot of time, of course, to think, be innovative during those times, but it's also a safety net that you really feel that you can try your ideas, be innovative, connect with industry and university. I would also like to highlight the innovative public sector we have in Sweden. And today, Sweden has a large public sector. Actually, 30% of the entire Swedish workforce are employed in this sector. And to give you one example, the app you see here on this smartphone is the tax agency, where you can do your tax return with one short message. You just reply, they calculate for you, they help it for you, and you reply if the numbers are correct with a short SMS. That's how you do your tax return. And I think also the culture in Sweden, it tells a lot when the most popular agency we have in Sweden when we do survey with the population is the tax agency. And that, I think, tells a lot about the culture of a society. We also have this, what we call the Quadruple helix system, where different sectors of the society collaborate. And this is nothing unique for Sweden, but I think we created, as I said, with the number of research foundation, number of universities, we fairly connected in Sweden and with the government to create this system that is really working with the civil society in the middle. And we have very strong, one part of this industry corner here is that we have production company, large production company, global multi-international companies, as you will see later in my presentation. And that has brought a huge advantage. And when you in academia apply for funding for government, normally from several of the funding agencies, you need to match that funding with the industry, like 50-50 matching, to get the money to the academia. And that creates a force for impact. To give you very quickly now some Swedish innovations based on what I said, did we see any results? And I think we did. So I will just give you fast flavor of great Swedish innovations, and I think you will recognize most of them, but you didn't know that they were Swedish. So let's start. The mobile telephony system, of course, the whole Bluetooth was developed in the south of Sweden. This is Ericsson, and Ericsson is now developing 5G, which really propels here in the United States. And that's also other companies like Nokia. But Ericsson in Sweden was the first nation that developed the GSM system and the Bluetooth system. In mechanics, the adjustable wrench, 1892, Swedish. The 3-point seatbelt, the Volvo cars. Safety is, of course, the highest priority. And this is a happy guy, the rear-facing car safety seat. We have a zero vision of car accidents in Sweden, and we work heavily with that from the government down in different innovations, ecosystem, and to the industry. The marine propeller, 1850, Swedish. The safety match, the lighthouse, the modern refrigerator, Electrolux is one company. The Tetra Pak of all the beverage packing today is Swedish. The household vacuum cleaner, also Electrolux on this picture. Celsius temperature, we have Fahrenheit here, we have Celsius. Celsius came 1741 with that scale. Carl von Linné, in talking about research, he wrote a Systema Nature, in Latin, of course, to systemize the nature, the different species. The ultrasound has a huge medical impact on the world when that came out. Dental implant, the pacemaker, saving lives. And the dialysis machine, the zipper, we all use that every day in different contexts. Skype, looking at the digital side. Of course, Spotify, the online music streaming service. The ball bearing, used in every skateboard, every car, you find it everywhere. And going from that now to just to show you that we also have this innovation platform, Facebook service. That was the first international, Facebook, when they said we're going to launch service somewhere on the globe, they selected Sweden, the northern part, up in Luleå, connected to the university. So that was the first international investment of international service for Facebook. They looked at that, and that was, of course, for the coldness, safety, but also electricity grid redundancy up there. It's like 4 or 5 times, I think. We have rocket science platform, the S-Range, connected, of course, with the government and industry, university, Volvo Trucks. We have a strong defense industry, Saab Defense. And I think it was last year, they went together with Boeing. They're going to build airplanes here in the United States, in West Lafayette, Indiana. And we also have a very strong naval production. We produce our own submarines in this case, and some connection and train together with the new US Navy. But that dual use of military technology, and then in the US, the civil society, which I see a lot in the United States, is also part of the Swedish innovation system. And that has created a large number of different companies that you can see, and that some of them are very strong production company. Is critical for an innovation system that you have those companies like ABB, Atlas Copco, SKF, AstraZeneca in life science, and so on. And now on top of that, we have the digital companies coming up. Moving into the future, what are the strategic areas in focus? I don't think this differs from many other countries, but we see, of course, smart cities and the combination of circular and bio-based economy. We've been working from the embassy in one very important area, that is waste management, waste to energy. I think we have unique solutions in Sweden, and we will be happy to help other countries like the US to work on that. Landfill and building up those landfills is a big, big problem. And we have solutions to work from waste to energy, how we burn, quite environmental, and successful solutions to that. Next generation travel and transport, of course, with the industry that we saw we have. And life science is of course, a big part of that, connected industry, and also new materials. I also would like to mention a few areas, that is the space. We have, as I said, up in north, the S-Range. The Arctic is of high importance, technology-wise, political-wise. So we're there doing research and in collaboration with other countries. Critical minerals is also very, very important. We have some of those critical minerals in Sweden. And in general, emerging technologies like quantum, 5G, AI, robotics, and so on, we're working on. And something very unique, I think, that we now in a big process in investment on is a fossil-free steel in Sweden, the hybrid project. Look into that. It's really amazing how far they have reached. And as from the government side, we aim at being a fossil-free nation by 2045. So that's very important. Ending up, we need to have, when you have a research and innovation system, large-scale infrastructure to do the really advanced tests. We have in Sweden many testbed and labs in different areas, but we have specifically 3 large-scale infrastructures, and that creates us a big data country, I should say. It's the MAX4 laboratory in the south of Sweden, connected to Lund University, one of the top 100 universities. And just next to that, we're currently building together with the European consortium, the European Spallation Source. So they will be next to each other. And in SciLife, we have the SciLife lab connected a few of the universities in the Stockholm region. And I think it's so important to have those infrastructure also for international collaboration to open up. United States, you have 17 of those national labs, which is very important. Finally, some observation and some differences I can see, especially with the United States, is that you started in the United States already after World War II to focus on large federal funding, massive funding to DARPA and so on. And that created internet, that created the GPS technology, that created stealth technology. And we see today that the large tech companies you have in the United States, 13 out of, I think, the 16 largest tech companies are Americans. They will not have existed if you didn't put in early federal funding at that scale. And now we see how those companies leverage on that. And the combination then to the universities surrounded, if you look at Silicon Valley, surrounded Stanford, Berkeley, etc., how the big tech platform runs that. And I see a major, I should say, general differences to run a university in Sweden and US, maybe I should say Europe and United States. From my hands-on experience at, let's say, Stanford University, there are 3 things I think you do a little bit differently. First of all, United States top university, you have a strong focus on education, and then how you connect that education to your research. And that is a big difference. In general, I should say, in Europe, and I see that also in Sweden, we have a lot of focus, of course, also on education, but the priority at the research faculty, at the faculty, is normally at education, but that's how you evaluate it when you get promoted. You evaluate both sides, both education and research, but my feeling is that most of the time you prioritize research. Here at Stanford and other, I notice extremely important it is to have the focus on education. You also, I think, are very careful when you recruit faculty and students, and especially here faculty. When you recruit, you do a global search. And I have data to see the difference between European university, and in this case, we looked at Berkeley, Stanford. You do a global search and you recruit globally. You don't go into your own university or other university in the area and recruit. You really want the best. And you spend a lot of time doing that search and very careful with that. The third part is mobility. And it's beautiful to see the public-private partnership between the university and the surrounding industry. And I think even in Sweden, I mentioned we're very strong at that, but I should say that the universities you have here is extremely strong in doing that. Another point here is the national labs. You have 17 of them, and it's beautiful to see how that is also connected to the surrounding, and it's run by most of them by Department of Energy. And we now from the Swedish government into collaboration, even agreements with Department of Energy and the White House in emerging technology. Connect, I show you the national labs we have, ESS and MAX4 at Lund University, and we want to connect that to the US labs. The third and last point is, I think, very interesting. That's the race between superpowers, especially in emerging technologies. And I had a fireside chat today with your CTO of United States, Michael Kratsius. And I'm really fascinating to see how you now spend resources focusing on quantum, even bringing quantum down in K-12 education in the United States. You have specific programs in that. It's beautiful to see that. And also the national security, which is very dominant by the administration. And that puts in research security and in integrity. And how do we in the academia think about that? We really need to keep the academic freedom there. And specifically, as my last point is, continue to have mobility, continue to collaborate between countries, make it easy for researchers and company to collaborate. So science is borderless, and we should continue to strive for that. Great, I think I end there. This is my hometown where I'm in the south of Sweden. Show you that, it's a beautiful place. So I end my talk there and looking forward to the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Henric. This was terrific. There's so many examples for us to learn from. And I would now like to hand the floor to Senator Lesser.
Can you hear me okay? Can everybody
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, yes.
All right, give me 1 sec to just, can you still hear me? Just,
Yes.
okay, all right. Well, hi everyone. I'm gonna take things in a little bit of a different direction. My name is Eric Lesser, and I am the state senator for the 1st Hampden and Hampshire district. So that's actually not too far from you. So I'm your Western Mass neighbor in the 413 area code. I currently am in Longmeadow, where I live, but I represent the cities of Springfield and Chicopee, as well as 7 towns up and down the Pioneer Valley, Longmeadow, East Longmeadow, Hampden, Wilbraham, Belchertown, and Granby. And while our other panelists and other guests took obviously a very global and international perspective, I'm going to bring things down to the local level for a sec and talk to all of you about the state's approach to the changing economy that we are all in. And very specifically, I want to talk about the Western Mass approach. I chair our Committee on Economic Development and Emerging Technologies in the State Senate, which really has a dual mandate. One is to promote economic development in the Commonwealth in the traditional sense. So that's historically meant infrastructure investment, municipal infrastructure support, worker training programs, community college incentives, business investment, but has increasingly also taken on the role of the second half of the title, which is emerging technologies. And especially in Massachusetts, and in particular, I would argue in the Berkshires and in Western Mass, it's emerging technologies, especially around advanced manufacturing, life sciences, and other high-tech fields that are going to be where the growth and the new investment comes from in the years to come. So I don't have slides because I'm gonna just talk through some of the issues I've been working on, some of the public policy questions we have at the State House, and then happy to take questions from everyone and engage in a little bit of a back and forth. So does that work for everyone? We can still hear me, right? Just want to make sure the internet is working.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So let me just pull up here. So first, we've spent a lot of time, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about something that we've kind of begun to describe as the future of work. And what does that really mean? Well, if you think about in the last 20 or 30 years, or really since the time I've been born, I was born in 1985, I'm 35 years old. Really everything about our society has changed in very fundamental ways. The way people communicate has changed. The way people socialize has changed. The way people travel and move around has changed. The way people work has changed very fundamentally and in very deep ways, and not always in ways that have been equitable or have been positive. We should talk about that as well. But One thing that hasn't changed all that much since the 1980s is the way we regulate work and the way we provide social safety nets for workers. In fact, our worker protection systems in the United States and in Massachusetts are based on, frankly, a 19th century model of industrial employment rather than a 21st century model of high technology and iterative skills. So what do I mean by this? And I actually think that this applies to both blue collar workers and industrial workers, service workers, and white collar and higher ed oriented workers as well. It's really been across the board. The era of clocking into a job at 9 a.m. and clocking out at 5 p.m. 5 days a week, 40 hours a week at a set schedule for 30 years, clocking in at age 25 and clocking out at age 65 and collecting a set pension and healthcare all along the way has really become a thing of the past. And I would argue that that's certainly not good, and it's created a tremendous amount of inequality and stress on families and on individuals as a result. And so the question is how do we catch up our system to be more flexible, to be more dynamic, and to provide people the security and the stability that they need as the economy changes. So what have these changes been? Well, work has become more iterative, more skills-based. And this is true even, for example, for industrial employment. My grandfather was a tool and die maker in Brooklyn. He basically did the same job from age 30 when he got out of the Navy until age 65 when he retired with Social Security. That is really not the expectation anymore for younger workers and is not the reality of what the current workplace demands. We need to make sure that we have training programs, and Berkshire Community College has been a big part of this, and we have workplace support that provides iterative training to people over the life of their careers so that they can continue to catch up with technology and can continue to keep themselves competitive in an employment market, and as a result, continue to boost wages, make more money, and provide for their families and their kids. So we've done things, for example, like promote lifelong learning accounts, which would be accounts that follow the worker. They don't follow the company, they follow the individual, that each person would be able to have to pay for. They might not need a 4-year bachelor's degree or a 2-year master's program. What they might need is a 12-week computer programming course or a 14-week advanced manufacturing precision machining course to get their skills caught up, to jump from, let's say, a $25 or $30 an hour position to a $40, $45, or $50 an hour position, and of course, make more money from there on out. So what we need to do is we need to create flexibility in our systems and in our educational infrastructure to allow for that kind of iterative training for people as they move through their careers. And we need, very importantly, childcare supports, healthcare supports, and other wraparound services for people so that it's realistic for them to take these training accounts. So I'll just give you an example. In West Springfield, which is a community probably a lot of people on the call are familiar with, we've done a lot of work with a group called the Lower Pioneer Valley Education Collaborative. What they have done is they've set up a training facility. It's based in West Springfield, but more than a dozen communities from around Western Mass participate in the program, where people will do the trainings at 8 a.m. on a Saturday. I know that sounds brutal, but that's when people are free, or at 9 p.m. on a Thursday. Because again, these are often folks that are working during the day or are participating in school or other family commitments during traditional work hours. So you got to meet people where they are. So they'll do that 9 p.m. or that, or 9 p.m. on a weekday or 8 a.m. on a weekend class. They'll provide childcare on site. They'll help with transportation to get people to or from those trainings. They'll get people through a maybe 12 to 14 week training program and then immediately place them at local employers that can then pick up from there and continue to do more training. And we've done a lot of work in this sector around specifically advanced manufacturing. And I'll just give you an example of how this can work in the real economy. You take someone, let's say a mother, who is right now has a child or maybe two children and is working at Dunkin' Donuts. Maybe they weren't able to finish high school, or they weren't able to get an education, or they're a new immigrant to the country. And let's say they were working at Dunkin' Donuts for $14 or $15 an hour. You get them into this training program. Again, you do it in the evenings, you do it in the morning. Remote learning, by the way, if implemented correctly, has tremendous potential for expanding the opportunity here. You get that person into one of these training programs. Again, you're talking about 10 weeks or 12 weeks. It doesn't have to be a long time. And then you immediately can transition them into employment where their salary goes from $15 an hour to $35 an hour, or even higher, with a lot of opportunity for advancement, for overtime, and of course for healthcare benefits and other supports. Now all of a sudden you've opened up that Dunkin' Donuts job for a young person or for a new person, and you've boosted wages and you've boosted employment all across the system. So we need to invest in more iterative training and training that appreciates that in the future people are going to have to be continuously learning. The era of clocking in for a 4-year college degree, clocking out, and then doing a job that only requires that base skill that you learned 15, 20, 30 years before really is a thing of the past. People are going to be continually learning new technology, and they're going to be continually learning and adapting to new systems in the workplace. And we need support structures that catch up with people and offer that. The other thing I just want to talk about a little bit is this concept of connectivity. And this is a very big issue in the Berkshires and in Western Mass. We still, and I know a lot of people on this call know this, we still have far too many communities that do not have high-speed internet, which is quite frankly an abomination. It's embarrassing that a country as wealthy and as powerful as the United States, and a state as progressive and as high-tech oriented as Massachusetts, would still have communities that don't have high-speed internet. But there's a second issue, which is that even in communities that do have internet on paper, I represent many of them, they do have high-speed connections on paper. The access is not equal. It's not of high enough quality for all families. And this has really come into stark relief with remote learning. You have families who, even if the household on paper has internet service, the internet service is not fast enough, it's not reliable enough, it's far too expensive. The customer support is not there for people to reliably do work from home or school from home. So we need to invest in and catch up our internet infrastructure. And we've done work, and we've allocated tens of millions of dollars on a state level for this. A lot more needs to happen. Frankly, we need the governor to make a bigger focus on this, especially in Western Mass. But I was struck by the conversation around 5G. If we get this right, you could have broadly implemented 5G connectivity everywhere in Western Mass. And there's another policy innovation that I've championed for a long time, which is municipal internet. The same way we have a lot of municipal electric companies. For example, Chicopee Electric Light, a municipal, actually New Deal era public electricity company that provides high quality, very low cost electricity to city residents. We should have municipal internet options so that people can choose a public option for their internet service that's reliable and that's low cost. We can create that connectivity, we can invest in that infrastructure, and then we also need physical connectivity. And with that, I'll just talk about something I've worked on for a long time, which is enhanced rail service. The Berkshires, in many respects, is really perfectly situated to take advantage of this trend we now see globally towards remote work. We're right in between two of the most dynamic economic centers in the world. We're right in between New York City and Boston. We have tremendous assets in Western Mass, great institutions like Berkshire Community College, a great quality of life, a beautiful place, frankly, a very beautiful place to live with a lot of great natural resources. We know the assets, of course, of Western Mass, but what we've historically lacked is the connectivity to that fast-growing economy and those good, high-paying jobs. So now we've been able to, in many respects, solve for the job issue, because someone can live in Pittsfield, someone can live in North Adams, they can live in Longmeadow or Lee or anywhere in between, or really anywhere in our region, and they can be connected to those jobs in Stockholm or in Seoul or in New York or in San Francisco. Geography in many respects is less important than it's ever been, which is a huge opportunity for us if we get the policy implementation right. And eventually, when COVID is over, hopefully sooner rather than later, hopefully at a certain point when we get the vaccine and people can begin to get back to regular life, I do think a lot of these trends around remote work, frankly, they were starting before coronavirus, obviously have taken off like a rocket ship since then. I do think a lot of these remote work trends are going to stay, but there will still obviously be a need for people to see each other and be connected to each other, which is where high-speed rail service comes in. If we make the improvements to have fast, reliable, frequent connections north-south to New York City, and certainly east-west to Boston, all of a sudden you're going to see tremendous new opportunities for our region, because people might do day-to-day work from their home via Zoom, via teleconference, but there's still going to be that need to connect with people in a person-to-person way. So you will see, I think, a rise of a new kind of breed of white-collar worker that's doing their work day-to-day at their home. Again, it could be their home in the Berkshires, and then maybe once a week, a couple times a month, they're taking the train to Boston, they're taking the train to New York to maybe work where their headquarters might be, or where other employees are flying in to do sort of higher level or creative meetings. That's a future that we can build in an equitable way by investing in affordable housing and smart growth and development around transit hubs. But again, we've got to get the policy right, and we've got to make sure that we're staying a step ahead of these trends so that Western Mass can take full advantage of these really global trends on a very local level. The other thing I would say is, just kind of in close before we kind of take conversation from everybody, is we also need to continue to keep an eye on equity. And all of the trends I just described, frankly, if we don't have the right policy around it, if we don't have the right sort of top level guidance and steering of these trends in order to promote equity and fairness, they could actually boomerang in very regressive ways and exacerbate existing inequalities. So let's take coronavirus and what we've seen with the coronavirus shutdowns. We've seen, for example, with the COVID shutdowns, that our low-wage workers, our service workers, predominantly Black and brown workforce, immigrant workforce, has been by far the hardest hit. 40% of wage workers at small businesses in Massachusetts have lost their jobs since coronavirus. Often family-owned businesses, locally owned businesses, where the wealth generation, the job creation is kept locally, were the first to close. And everybody, of course, saw at the same time Amazon and Walmart and Apple stock price reach record highs. We need state policy and we need public policy to counteract that and steer these trends so that they can support local workers. And again, the items I just described: investment in public broadband, investment in public high-speed internet and to get that virtual connectivity done, investment in iterative lifelong learning and lifelong training, very, very important, and then investments in the rail service for that physical connectivity will help bring the benefits of these big global trends locally to our communities in Western Mass so that they can benefit. And I'll just end by saying, we're obviously in a time of great challenge. This is not an ordinary time. We're not meeting in an ordinary time. We're not talking in a sort of business as usual period. And certainly our communities in Western Mass are facing significant challenges. We continue to see, of course, the virus linger. I think it's telling that South Korea, the other handle coronavirus much better than our country, but we still do have the COVID-19 challenge here in the United States and in Western Mass to deal with. We have the economic consequences of that, and we have important racial and economic inequalities that we need to reckon with. But in previous eras of our country's history, where we faced great challenge, we have risen to the occasion as a country, have overcome and have built back better and stronger in a more equitable way as a result. And I would just point out, the last time we were facing kind of comparable economic challenges, at the height of the Great Depression, America built 800 airports at a time when most Americans had never even seen an airplane in the mid-1930s. 800 airports were built. The Great Depression, interestingly, came after a time of profound technological transformation. This was the era of the rise of electricity and electric utilities. Government responded by steering the benefits of those transformations into public electricity, into the TVA, into rural electrification. We need to marshal that same sense of common purpose and common vision into today's challenges, which are racial inequality, geographic inequality, communities in Western Mass that have not seen the same economic growth and opportunity that our peer communities in Eastern Mass have seen. This really is the time to make those big changes and to make those big investments and to reorient our education system, to reorient our transportation system, to reorient our technology and broadband internet ecosystem to support equity and to support growth in all of our communities, and especially in the Berkshires and here in Western Mass. So I had kind of more general comments to share of sort of just our thought process and my thought process about how I go about these issues and sort of grounding it here locally. But want to thank the other members of this panel for a really fascinating set of presentations about what's happening in other countries. And I think there's a lot for us to learn from and implement on a local level here.
Okay, thank you very much, Senator Lesser, Professor Johnson, and Professor Yao and Ms. Chow. So we do have a number of questions, and James Rosenstein and I are going to be sort of sharing this responsibility. I've been following the questions in chat. And I am going to move them around a little bit, not in the order in which they came, just so we can touch on the presentations by all the speakers. But Senator Lesser touched on this at the end, but Bruce Cohen wants to know from our Korean colleagues, what was the secret to South Korea's success with COVID? Bruce points out that South Korea and the United States had their first cases of COVID on the same day. South Korea has had 405 deaths and the United States has had over 200,000. So I know, Yehlin, this is one of your areas of expertise. So if you would like to respond to that question, it would be great.
I think especially through the using the diagnostic reagents that developed by domestic companies, Korea was able to take a very rapid infection control measures against the COVID-19. For example, one of the diagnosis system was developed and approved during 3 weeks after COVID was released. So the development of kit using the artificial intelligence algorithm and also the AI-based clinical diagnostic program can be a very good technology to catch COVID-19. And also, I think in the aspect of the tracing, the self-quarantine and drive-through screening process allow early detection of cases. Also, the social distancing between people in the public area was kept in public area and also in the private locations. Those tracing and treatment allows Korea to keep catch the rapid growth into a very lower level. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. We have another question, actually two questions for Professor Johnson. And one is, has Sweden always been feminist and supportive of women in the workforce and work-life balance? And if not, when did this transition happen? And a follow-up question for that is from one of our listeners who's a physician and has been involved with medical education. Is the Karolinskaya Institute considered a major research institution, and how productive has investment in life science been in Sweden and in Massachusetts?
Okay, yeah, thanks for the question. So first, I just want to say, and I totally agree with the senator, that we need to innovate with equity in mind. That was a great remark. So the first question, has Sweden always been thinking about this? And the answer is no, of course not. This has been a way back a big problem for all countries, and still is. I mean, I don't say that Sweden, we're not 100% happy with where we are, and this is a part of the government agenda to constantly work with this. And we still have in Sweden like a pay gap, I think, remains between women and men about 11% that we need to continue working on. But historically, we made some decisions in Sweden, and I can give you the numbers. 1842, we started with school reforms allowing girls to be educated. 1990, women gained rights to vote in Sweden. 1938 was the birth control and abortion legalized in Sweden. 1947, we had the first woman in government. And 2002, we came up with the 480 days parental leave. We're about 44% women in parliament. In Europe, that number is 28%, so almost double. And in North America, it's about 22%, I think, of the women in parliament. So we almost doubled that. And I think a great example is, unfortunately, that Justice Ginsburg recently passed away, and maybe you don't know, but she had a strong connection to Sweden. She became an honorary doctor in 1969. And she has many honorary doctor positions around the globe. But according to herself, she only wears one of those rings, and that was in Sweden. She claims that's where she started to look into the legislation and the law system and look at how many women we have. I think when she was there, 25% women in the classroom studying law in Sweden, 1969 something. So I hope I answered that question. Second question regarding Karolinska Institute. It's also one of those top 100 universities that we're very proud of. And their work in life science with the surrounding system and the companies, AstraZeneca, etc., is very strong. And they also connected to one of the national labs I mentioned, SciLife Lab in Stockholm. So they are one of the motors in that area. What was the third question?
The third question had to do with the return on investment, and that had two sides. One is, has there been good return on investment in life sciences in Sweden? And second, the return on investment in life sciences here in Massachusetts.
I can address the Massachusetts one.
Yes, thanks. So, yes, you start, please.
Okay. Yeah. Well, just quickly to address because it's an interesting and actually very important question about whether the public investment that's been made in the life sciences industry in Massachusetts, whether we've gotten a return that's commensurate with that investment. And so, just a little bit of history for people who might not be familiar. About 12 years ago, Massachusetts was 7th or 8th in the country in terms of life sciences investment. We were kind of neck and neck and competing with a group of other regions of the country for really the top spot in life sciences and especially advanced pharmaceutical and disease research. Certainly, the San Francisco area was up there, northern New Jersey, the Austin, Texas region, the Research Triangle of Raleigh-Durham, North Carolina, the Washington, D.C. Metro area where the NIH, obviously NIH and other big federal research programs are located. And it was unclear, actually, which region was going to really dominate that space. Everybody knew that biotech and life sciences was really going to be where the future of a lot of investment was going to be, but it was a little unclear where in the country that investment was going to be dominant. So a decision was made. I was not part of that decision. I was in college at the time, but Governor Patrick, Deval Patrick, really made a decision with the legislature to really kind of double down on investment in research and investment in life sciences sector. And it really proved actually by almost any measure to be a major success, to the point where 10 years later, so about a year or two ago, Massachusetts was really indisputably per capita the life sciences center of the country. We are, just to give you a sense, second in overall employment in life sciences. More than 300,000 people in Massachusetts work in life sciences. To put that in perspective, the only region comparable to us is California as a whole state, and they are much bigger than Massachusetts. And again, these are raw numbers, so it's kind of astonishing. When the initiative was first launched 10 years ago, I believe 3 or 4 of the top 20 global pharmaceutical research companies in the world had a bricks and mortar presence in Massachusetts. Now 18 of the top 20 have a major brick and mortar presence in Massachusetts. Again, it employs now hundreds of thousands of people. But there are some major limitations. First, the industry is hyper concentrated in a handful of zip codes, largely in Kendall Square and around the 128 corridor. So of course, for us in Western Mass, that doesn't do much good because you're creating a whole lot of great high paying jobs in a region of the state that was already doing well. Again, thinking about equity in terms of these investments. And the industry was frankly not diverse really in any way. It was overwhelmingly and is overwhelmingly male, overwhelmingly white, and was overwhelmingly employing people at the very high end of the education ladder, master's degree, PhD level, and even higher. So a very deliberate strategy was put in place. And I was the author of this. It was called Life Sciences 2.0. We did it about 2 years ago. Governor Baker signed it into law to pull that industry farther west. So the Berkshire Innovation Center, for example, is part of that investment. The research campus that's opened at Bay State Medical Center in Springfield is part of that investment. And then to diversify it, bring in more women, bring in more minorities in order to spread out the gains of this really rocket ship industry that's creating a lot of wealth, but has to be more equitable. So we've put in place, for example, paid internship programs to build and diversify the talent pipelines. We've invested in a new program to buy lab equipment for community colleges and for high schools in gateway cities. Pittsfield's been a big beneficiary of this. So there's a lot more work to do, but I would say that overall, absolutely. It's been worth the investment. We do have to do a lot more on equity, but the fact that Massachusetts really is now at the center of this very fast growing industry only creates opportunity for us.
Okay, thank you. Professor Johnson, what about Sweden?
Yes, so rapid response on has it had a large economical impact life science? Yes, of course. It's been a prioritized area for the government for many years when in science and innovation. And the last year we, from the government side, also add health and life science, the health perspective, because you need to invest early in the society to remove barriers and problems later on in life. So health and life science together. And of course, then we are very, very happy from the Swedish side to see that now in October in Seattle, they open up the Hans Rosling Center for Population Health, a $230 million donation from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. If you haven't read Hans Rosling's, a Swedish guy's book, I think Bill Gates put him as his one of the favorite books he read, and they were very good friends. So combination of health and life science.
Okay, thank you. We have a number of questions related to the internet. So for our South Korean and Swedish speakers, the question is, how affordable is the internet and smartphones in Sweden and in South Korea? In the United States, they're quite expensive. So if the costs are lower in Sweden and South Korea, can you give us an idea of what those are and how it's been possible to keep those prices lower? And then the second part of that question is for Senator Lesser. And it is, if you had to choose between high-speed rail and high-speed internet, where would you make the investment? So we'll start with our South Korean colleagues and end with Senator Lesser. And Megan has told us that if our colleagues can stay on, we can go a few minutes over time because we have many more questions than we can answer in 4 minutes. So Yehlin or Hyeon, could you talk about the cost of internet and smartphone costs in South Korea?
I think the internet cost is usually $8 for me a month.
And just so you guys know, that's, I have Spectrum in Pittsfield. It is not a 5G connection, and I pay more than $100 a month. So that gives you an idea of the comparison. So for Sweden?
Yeah, I'm just checking our operators in Sweden right now, and it differs, of course, but I should say less than around $20–30 per month to get a mobile connection. The prices for smartphones is, I think, the same price as here, but to get access to mobile broadband is $20–30.
Okay, and just a question. So what is the difference that makes the cost so much lower in Sweden and in South Korea? Professor Johnson, could you talk about Sweden?
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm sure we have more regulations in Europe. I mean, Swedish, it's regulated by Europe, and in Sweden we follow that and also give input, of course. So I think we have a different regulations to this. I'm not really sure, but that's my guess.
Okay, and either Yehlin or Hyeon, what keeps the cost down in South Korea?
Because actually people are very much sophisticated in internet. Also, actually, Korean people think internet is free usually. So, so all companies, they cannot raise. It's really difficult to raise cost of internet because people think internet is always free. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And Senator Lesser, if you had to choose between high-speed rail and high-speed internet.
Well, so thanks for the question. I will answer it. I'll just say, unfortunately, I have to jump after this because I have a 3 o'clock commitment I have to jump into. But I would just challenge the premise of that question. I mean, I think that we have a lot of work we need to do around equity, around internet connectivity in Western Mass, and investment we need to make in especially connecting the communities that do not currently have high-speed internet. And we have a lot of work we need to do around equity in terms of access to internet, even in the places where there is a connection. As you pointed out, Professor Kidd, it's too expensive, even in the communities that have it. But, you know, frankly, I think those are fairly fixable issues. They should be able to be fixed pretty quickly. It's a political paralysis that's prevented progress on those issues. It's certainly not engineering or logistical challenges, And I think as evidenced by the fact that other countries represented on this call have much less expensive internet, is an example of the fact that this is really a policy failure in the United States rather than an issue of technology or innovation. And then the second thing I would say is I would actually connect trains to that too. All the countries represented on this call have much faster, much cheaper public infrastructure networks than the United States. The challenge we've had in America is the political will and marshaling the political will to overcome that. And I view them as complementary. They're both elements of infrastructure. One is infrastructure in terms of information flow over broadband, and the other is the movement of people, which is connected to innovation and the flow of ideas. So both need to happen together. So I don't think we need to settle for either or. I think we should be working towards investments in both.
Okay, thank you so much, Senator Lesser. And please thank you for joining us. And
I'll be back. Yeah,
good luck with your next meeting. We'll have you back soon.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much, Senator Lesser. It was
Thank
a pleasure
you.
to have you.
Okay, and if our Swedish and Korean colleagues can stay on for a couple more minutes, we do have some additional questions. For Professor Johnson, do you know whether the U.S. Internal Revenue Service has reached out to Sweden to find out about whether we can modernize our system?
I mean, that's the relationship between US and Sweden is very strong at many different levels. So we talk, yeah. So yes, the answer is yes. So is that?
Yes, that was the question. So I think Louise Frankenberg, who asked that question, is hoping maybe she can pay our taxes on her
very good
smartphones.
relationship between our countries in many areas.
Okay, thank you. There is another question here, and this is for both of our people from both South Korea and Sweden. And that is, this is from Barbara Malkus, who's the superintendent of schools in North Adams. And Barbara, thank you so much for being on. Her question is, how did the mindset get changed, both within the population and among political leaders, to promote this kind of technological transformation? Because Barbara feels that we haven't sort of turned that corner in terms of public policy yet. So her question is, how did that transformation happen in your two countries? So why don't we start with Professor Johnson and then go to South Korea?
Okay, thank you. It's a very relevant and good question. So I think in a country with Sweden with 10 million people, the local internal market is not enough. We always had to collaborate and find partners, export, especially when we have those brilliant minds creating those companies that then became multinational companies. That became a natural thing to do, like IKEA, Ericsson, as I mentioned. We needed to go global. IKEA became too big just for the Swedish population. So that's part of the DNA to go global fast. And I think we still can learn from that, especially from the US and Silicon Valley, how you scale, how you think global from the beginning when you do your startup.
Okay, thank you. And for South Korea?
Yehlin? Oh, okay. Can you talk to me the point again?
The point is, how do you think the mindset changed in South Korea to make it possible to shift to this high level of technological transformation?
Oh, I see. I think this is related to high-tech actual education and infra. So Yehlin, actually, you have some data about this education and infra, right? You mentioned.
Yeah.
about AI first. It's okay. I think AI is also related to digital transformation and also AI transformation. It's maybe very overlapping.
Maybe I can ask the question in a little more pointed way. Professor Yao, you talked about the transformation of Korea from one of the poorest countries in the world in 1953 to one of the wealthiest countries in the world.
Right.
And there was an economic crisis in 1997 with a lot of controversy about the policies that were imposed by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. But since 1997, there's been tremendous change and transformation in South Korea. What are 2 or 3 components that you think have contributed to that transformation?
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, you first. They go first thing.
Maybe I can give an answer. So, like in the start of 1997, we suffered from Asian financial crisis. From that moment, and at that moment, we faced a very serious economic danger and loss. So, the Korean social economy, as we know today, began to arise with initiatives in the non-governmental sector from the very late 1990s, and it undergo very institutional evolution, like the very economic activities at the junction between state and also the market and the civic public sector were collaborated together, and many social organizations were created in very many regions, and it all rose as very high economy, and it reached very high economy through these.
And adding that, actually, that's good. Adding that, from before then, actually, Korean people and the businessmen are focused on a local market rather than global. But after 1997, most of Korean business and even startups, they started to watch or to see as a global market. And from that time also, rather than leaning on big conglomerates or big companies, Korean startups, ICT-based startups, they are started to do something to business, and then some of them actually are very successful. Also, third point is that actually selection and focus policy, I think.
Okay, thank you. I think we are out of time now. So I would just like to remind people that next week we're going to be talking about technology infrastructure. So if you have questions about the internet and access to the internet in Western Massachusetts, come back next week. And I'd like to turn over our closing to my colleague, James Rosenstein.
Thank you very much, Kate. I was about to say the same thing. I'm talking about infrastructure. This is something we will be talking about next week. It is a key topic. I think the subjects that have been covered today are so essential to our growth, our future, how to implement new technologies, how to achieve greater equity, how to improve education. There's so many things that are relevant. And I would like to thank all of you for your input, for your contributions. And this is something that we much look forward to continuing. I hope that we will be able to continue to exchange views. And I would like to thank the audience and thank everybody for your presence, for your questions, for your participation. And we look forward to seeing you next week. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah.